Welcome to CreateGrowProfit Coaching Stories. I am Morris from CreateGrowProfit.com, and today I'm speaking to Nat Couropmitree, who is currently exploring self-sabotage, but with a twist. Nat, thank you so much for being here. Where are you calling in from today?
Yeah, thank you so much, Morris. I'm grateful to be here. I love podcasts and these types of conversations. I'm based in just outside Boston, Massachusetts, in the U.S.
Nat, you have to me, such an interesting background growing up as a Thai Buddhist monk. But tell me first, who are you working with today? What kind of clients do you serve today?
Yeah, so many. Well, okay, I'll address your questions. I didn't grow up as a Buddhist monk, but I spent some time as a Buddhist monk. I just want to address that.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, I don't want to mislead people, so I always want to say that. So the people I currently serve are mostly entrepreneurs, mostly small business owners, but also just regular working professionals as well, who want to prioritize themselves, who want to prioritize their well-being, and perhaps um, have been conditioned to or have habitually put other people first. Um, and in this exploration or in my coaching or guidance, I also look at self sabotage because I've come to see that self sabotage is a form of self protection, and that there's some part of us trying to keep us safe. And so self sabotage comes in where people get in their own way or hold themselves back because they're concerned that if they do what they want, then they're going to experience loss or rejection or disappointment. And it feels easier to hold back than to face the possibility of rejection or disappointment.
Yeah, you're definitely describing an experience that I have made too, when you put it that way. When people come to you, do they are they aware of their self-sabotage? Is that something they express verbally to you?
They don't necessarily verbalize it as self sabotage, but they may relate it more to, like, often in my marketing workshops I talk about procrastination. I talk about overthinking. I talk about perfectionism. I talk about people not wanting to rock the boat or trying to create waves. These are the ways that they more relate to. Like, they're aware that, oh, there's this thing that I want to do and I avoid it. There's this thing that I want to do, and then I have thoughts that keep me from moving forward. That is self sabotage.
Okay. And what do you recommend? Do you recommend people to do it anyways or work through those emotions? What is the approach?
Well, for some people, they can just do it anyway, but that's not the type of person that I usually attract to work with. Um, Usually, the people that I attract to work with, and this includes myself, this is why I do this work, because I've seen that I've engaged in these habits and behaviors for most of my life, not realizing it, right? Um, but for a lot of the people I work with, there's such a visceral discomfort in their body, like contraction in their abdomen, maybe tightness in their chest, or their brain gets like foggy, that it's hard for them to just go forward and take action. And they will get distracted, or they will get busy doing things that seemingly seem important and likely are important, but it's just another form of procrastination. For those people, just taking action going forward doesn't work. It's just the discomfort is too much, and they're trained to avoid it, and so they'll look for an escape. For these people, what I found is that learning to acknowledge the discomfort, acknowledge the beliefs, that are coming up or the thoughts that are coming up, and then being present with them, being present with all of it in our bodies is the way to create change, is the way to create a shift. The challenge is that most people have not been taught to just be with it, right? Most people, even well meaning experts, have said that, oh, you just have to change your beliefs, you have to change your mindset. And for the people that I work with, they may have already tried to change their mindset. They may have already tried to use productivity hacks like blocking time or getting a good planner or that sort of thing. And it's not sustainable. What they're actually afraid of, they might not know that they're afraid of, but they don't like to feel uncomfortable. And we've been taught and conditioned to believe that all discomfort is bad. But if we can be with that discomfort and still know and still recognize that we're okay, right? We can be with both at the same time. It changes something in us that allows us to take action and quiet or even maybe let go of that inner resistance.
I'm really fascinated by what you're saying here because I see that when I try to help people with marketing. And that was my journey too in marketing, where putting myself on social media created a physical discomfort, a physical reaction. So, if I understood you correctly, what you're helping people do is kind of feeling comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest, it's not a comfortable thing. um, it's inviting people to realize that they can sit with the discomfort and know that they're still okay. They don't have to run from the discomfort. The discomfort mean doesn't always mean what they think it means. Because a lot of times, like, and I experienced this in marketing as well and creating my business, putting myself out there, is that, earlier on in when I first started my business, I'm like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I need structure. Okay. So I sign up for a coaching program. I have the structure, I have techniques. I still feel not ready, right? And so I think in my mind, oh, I need more experience. I can't charge yet for my services. And so I get a lot of experience, and I still don't feel ready. Right. And so the thing is, the mind keeps looking for a way to avoid the discomfort, the possibility of being rejected, or the possibility of someone saying you're not good enough, or, the possibility of someone saying you're a fraud and you don't know what you're doing. The mind is looking for ways to plug all the holes, but the mind is also the thing that creates all the holes, right? Um, it's a guy I used to follow, Kyle Cease. He talked about how um, the mind creates a picture of a monster, and then we forget that we created that picture, and we are afraid of that monster, right? So the same thing happens for anyone starting something new. We step into the unknown, we step into the unfamiliar, and the mind doesn't know what to do with that. And so it'll try to fill all the holes, put up the protection to avoid the possibility of ever being called the thing that you don't want to be called, right? But we don't actually know that that's going to happen. We just think it's going to happen. We feel the discomfort immediately. We don't like the discomfort, and we run away and try to find a way to resolve it.
And all of this happens under the umbrella of self-sabotage.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very interesting. It attached to self-sabotage or in addition to self-sabotage, what are some of the other things you work through with your clients?
Yeah. So, besides self-sabotage, I mean, it goes hand in hand. Um, I invite people to try on new ways of being, so to experiment, because it's one thing to resolve the discomfort in our body. It's another thing to practice showing up in life in a different way, right? If you're someone that is always helping out, always there for other people, and that feels familiar to you, but if you yourself are not in your own life, if if the things that you want to do you don't have time for, then it's going to feel uncomfortable to take a break, to do nothing, to enjoy yourself, right? Because it's going to feel in your body like, oh, you should be doing something, or someone somewhere needs your help. And so you're going to gravitate toward doing more of what feels familiar and avoid what feels uncomfortable. So in this case, I would invite someone, okay, set one day, maybe an hour where you do nothing, and then see what comes up for you. See what feelings, what thoughts, the urge to do something, and just watch it without doing anything. Take note of it, but watch it and see that if it can subside, right? Because it's that same thing. We feel the discomfort, we don't like it. Let's numb it, let's get rid of it, let's avoid it, let's do something. But then we're not taking action consciously, we're taking action to avoid discomfort and pain.
Yeah. What you're describing sounds almost like if you're not used to it, then doing the right thing can feel wrong. Even though you're doing the right thing, you experience wrong emotions.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, one of my big things was I avoided confrontation. I and in a relationship with my wife, there are some things that needed to be talked about, but I was afraid of the consequences bec- due to my own childhood conditioning, right? For me, growing up as a kid, whenever there would be confrontation, or it wasn't even confrontation, it was just having a conversation, um, where either I was made to feel wrong, or if it didn't go right, I got the silent treatment. And so in my body, in my memory, I have that, and I don't like that, right? And so I had to learn that, okay, I could bring up a conversation, I could be with the discomfort in my body, and even though it feels intense in my body, um, I could still have the conversation, and then I could see that, oh, even though I expect that it's going to be weird after the conversation, like the energy is going to be weird, there's going to be like, we're not going to be talking, or we're going to be, being in our own kind of defensive postures. No, it doesn't happen that way. Um, there's another possibility that, like, oh, we're just regular humans having a conversation now. We're not stuck in that charged energy that I experienced so often as a kid.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that story, by the way. I know it's personal, but I think many people can relate to that in some way. Um, how, for example, if somebody wants to post videos of themselves on social media and they experience that, what you've just described, what would be something that they can do or experiment with to, to get over it or create a healthier way to deal with it?
Yeah, it is a great example because this was me last year. This is when I started diving deeper into self sabotage. I wanted to post a video, and I had this insight. I'm like, "Oh, okay, I'm going to record the video and I'm going to post it." And then I got in my head. I was like, "Oh, but like the technology is not right. How do I figure out subtitles?" I went into researching it, and then I was going back and forth. I'm like, "Okay, so, screw the subtitles. I'm just going to post this. I just need to post this." And then I kept negotiating with myself, right? Of like, "Oh, just post it. No, 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 no. Just post it. No, 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 no." Right? And so I sat down with myself and my followed my intuition, asked myself questions, and I came out with this process that I now call the resistance release technique. And so essentially, um, what I would encourage someone to do is to, um, first of all, acknowledge what they're feeling, um, be compassionate with themselves, not judgmental. Because if self sabotage is self protection, and there's a part of us that's trying to protect us, then if we're judgmental of ourselves or of that part, it's going to put up the barriers even more, right? Like if you say something to me, Morris, and I say, Morris, you're wrong. What you're doing, even though you're trying to help me, and I tell you you're wrong, you're going to put up your guard, right? And that's what happens in our body. But if we can acknowledge it and be compassionate with it, that's already a big step forward. Yeah. Um, the next would be to get to know what are the beliefs yeah, essentially what are the beliefs that this part of you has. Um, what are you trying to protect from? And in my process, I ask questions like, um, what is this part of you trying to avoid? What doesn't it want to be seen as, or what doesn't it want to be told, right? And often the answers are like, I don't want to come across as an idiot, or no one wants what I have to offer, or you know people are going to think that this is not good enough. All of these ways of thinking are often very young, right? And I find that that part of ourselves that's trying to protect from being hurt is young in nature. Yeah. So, it's that part of us that, I talked about, like, in when I was a kid and having conversations, I was made to feel wrong. So I protect against that. Oh, I don't want to come across as, I don't want someone to tell me I'm wrong. So I'm going to preemptively stop it by not doing anything, right? By avoiding, by procrastinating. I don't want that. I don't like that feeling. And so I'm going to stop it. So essentially asking yourself these types of questions, what outcome is this part of me trying to avoid? Um, what don't I want to be told? What don't I want to be seen as? What are the ways does this part of me protect, keep me safe? And you start to get an idea of how this part of you operates. The next step, which is what I call allowing, is that thing that I talked in the beginning about being with the statements, feeling them in your body without trying to change anything, just like meeting ourselves with loving acceptance. Before we started this conversation, you introduced me as exploring self-sabotage with a twist, right? And so I've come to believe that self-sabotage is an act of love, right? There's that part of us that's protecting us out of love because it wants to keep us safe. It doesn't want us to be disappointed. And so, but we also engage in loving ways. Like sometimes we self sabotage because, like for instance, I had one client who wanted to make time for her well being, plan her food, plan to exercise, but she never had time. She could never make the time, and it came out was that when she was young, she didn't have a lot of people who spent time with her, who she felt abandoned. And so for her kids, her family, she didn't want to abandon them. And so she was always around for them, even if they didn't really voice needing her around. She just chose to be around just in case. But unbeknownst to us is that when we are trying to be there for other people so they don't feel abandoned, we can abandon ourselves, right? Because in some ways, we act in the same way that we were treated. So, So this is how I see self-sabotage being an act of love. And so as a result, we need to meet ourselves with love, with loving awareness, right? So we get to meet that part of ourselves that's afraid, that's putting up the protective gear, the shields, the walls. Meet it with love, meet it with acceptance, so that it feels safe to be whatever it is. So it feels heard, that like, okay, yeah, I'm doing this. I didn't know that you're a grown up now. I didn't know that things are different, right? But seeing that you can be with me and be with the discomfort, I can let go of some of this resistance. I can see that, oh, you have the capacity now to be with the discomfort and to be with life. And I don't need to play this role anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like how many examples you're sharing, Nat. Like even from your own life, it's very authentic what you do in your work. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, thank you.
I have a follow-up question. So, two things. The first thing I noticed is how many of these triggers seem to come from earlier days or childhood. And I already introduced you half wrong, I guess, saying you grew up as a Buddhist, Thai Buddhist monk, but that wasn't accurate. So, as we talked before, can you just summarize what you learned, how you grew up? And you also mentioned going to a Catholic school. And then I would be really curious if you think much of those teachings that you learned, if they are influencing your coaching today, or or if it's not that connected.
I don't know if they directly influence my coaching today. I would say that as a kid, I was very curious, and potentially growing up in a Buddhist family. You had asked about, is it a philosophy versus a religion, before we started the conversation. Um, I did grow up with that belief that it was more of a philosophy on how to live life, and it wasn't like our way or the highway, which is sometimes some religions feel that way. I'm not saying all, and I would also say that at the root of all religions, I think there's a pureness that speaks to this, and then sometimes man might take the religion and use it as a form of control, right? I think there's a possibility of that. But I grew up with a lot of curiosity. So not only did I learn Buddhism and kind of engage in the rituals of Buddhism because it was just a part of my family's culture, I did go to a Catholic school for fifth grade, and then they took me out of that and put me to a Baptist school the next year. And then they took me out of that because the Baptist school, they kept showing up at our house and wanting to convert us. Um, so that was like, kind of felt like crossing boundaries for us. We had enough of that. But even in college, I explored. I was very curious in religious and trying to find like what tied it together, and I explored a little bit of the Baha'i faith, not deeply, but just had a surface. I feel embarrassed saying that, but just a surface interest of like, oh, like what is it that ties all this together? um I would say what does influence my coaching is probably that I had curiosity and I have an acceptance that everyone has their path, and that there is not one way that is right for everyone. And that's probably something I bring very much into my coaching is, I will never tell you this is the way to do it. I will invite you to explore something, to come to your own understanding, to your own truth of what's right for you. And I find that's more empowering. I used to be someone that followed all the experts because I had a deep sense of fear in who I was. And I followed everyone that had the formulas and the techniques because I wanted a guarantee. But I never got that. It took me some time to, recognize like, okay, I got to find what works for me.
And that's why now you can help others find what works for them, I believe.
Yeah.
You mentioned following all the experts, implementing the expert advice. I tend to do that too, by the way. Like I'm very, how do you say, like systematic and almost academic about these processes, but that's not reality. In reality, we got to test a bunch of things and find what works for us. And how did you get started with your coaching practice? What did you do to get your first few clients and get the business off the ground?
So I started coaching ages ago, probably before you were born, likely. Uh, uh, I started in 2006. Um, am I right? Were you born yet, Morris?
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm I'm 36.
Oh, okay, okay. um, so back then things were different. My coach at that time recommended that I do a workshop, and I was so afraid, so nervous, so anxious, that I procrastinated a lot. And then she's like, "Okay, just set the date, do the workshop." And so what I did is I found local venues, bookstores, spiritual bookstores, wellness centers, and those that had a community already had an audience. Maybe they had a mailing list or even a paper newsletter, and I would find those and put together a workshop. And that became something that I enjoyed doing. I didn't know it, but I really love teaching and engaging and interacting. And that's how I built my business. Is I just put on a lot of workshops, connected with people, invited them to have a conversation, and then if it was a good fit, they would sign up for my coaching.
Would you say the same strategy still works today?
It does. I mean, it's different, because so very few people have paper newsletters now. They have online, but online still works, but it's still people may be more distracted. People's attention spans are different now. And also, some of them, like, people are they're smarter about marketing. They're not, they're looking for things that are more authentic. At least my audience is like, audience is not going to, like, my first workshop was like 7 roadblocks to living a good life. And these days my audience will probably not respond to a 7 roadblocks workshop. A number, like 3 ways to do this or that, like that sort of thing. Even though it's rampant still in the business world and marketing, my audience not likely to respond to something like that. So I think that's important for your audience to just recognize, like, okay, it could be a good place to start. Like, don't overthink it and try to get it right. Like, that was my thing. Like, oh, I need to get it right. No, just like put it out there and test and experiment. But I took a break from coaching and I came back, and now I'm rebuilding it again, and different focus, different. The self-sabotage thing is a new thing, and I'm doing the same thing I did whatever 20 years ago. Is I'm putting on workshops, going out there, meeting people. I find for me that works better than online. Um, I think it's just who I am, and I get lost online with social media. And people have shared over the years that there's something about my voice or presence that they get something from, that they may not get from just text-based promotions, and so I'm leaning into that.
And as more and more people go online, that only creates more opportunities offline, I believe.
Yeah.
Nat, thank you so much for sharing all of this. People listening to this, how can they get in touch with you?
So I created this thing. It's kind of an audio meditation, or mindfulness practice. It's called Notice and Be With. It's the very thing that we've talked about a lot today. And so they can go to inquisitivejourneys.com/be with, BEWITH. and I'm guessing that you'll probably put that in the show notes as well, Morris. But that's probably the quickest way to contact me, is to just access that, or you can go to my website, inquisitivejourneys.com.
Okay, great. So if somebody is procrastinating something, running away, keeping themselves busy, running away from uncomfortable feelings, then that um, mindfulness practice will help them take the first step. Am I right?
Yeah, yeah, we're in a society that's taught to avoid pain and avoid discomfort, to over medicate, things like that. So meeting ourselves differently is really going to make a difference.
Great. And that's free, right?
Yeah, that's free.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll link to both of those. Thank you so much, Nat.
You're so welcome, Morris. This has been a joy and a pleasure. Thank you.